On a cold January night in New York City, a frail old man stands alone at his hotel window, feeding pigeons by hand. The city outside hums with electricity, his electricity. Yet inside the room, the lights are dim, the furniture is rented, and history has already begun to forget his name. Somewhere between lightning and silence, genius and ruin, Nikola Tesla waits for tomorrow. A tomorrow he invented, but would never live to see. The night Nikola Tesla entered the world did not arrive quietly. On July 10th, 1856, in the small village of Smiljan, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the sky fractured open. Lightning tore through the darkness in violent, blinding arcs. Thunder rolled so close, it felt as if the earth itself were cracking apart. Rain lashed the rooftops. Animals cried out. Villagers crossed themselves and whispered prayers, convinced something unnatural was unfolding above them. Inside a modest house, by the light of oil lamps trembling with every thunderclap, a child was being born. The midwife, shaken by the storm and steeped in superstition, reportedly muttered that this was a bad omen. A child born in lightning, she said, would belong to darkness. The mother, exhausted but unafraid, answered calmly, almost prophetically, "No, he will be a child of light." That child was Nikola Tesla. From the very beginning, his life would exist between myth and reality, between forces he could never fully control. The storm would follow him, not always in the sky, but in his mind, his relationships, and the strange, unrelenting energy that seemed to pulse through him long before he understood what electricity even was. Smiljan was not a place that prepared a boy to change the world. It was rural, isolated, bound tightly by tradition and faith. Tesla's father, Milutin, was a Serbian Orthodox priest, a disciplined man with a powerful memory and a talent for poetry and language. He expected his son to follow him into the clergy, to live a life of words and sermons, not machines and sparks. Tesla's mother, Duka, could not read or write, yet possessed an almost mechanical intelligence. She designed household tools in her head, crafting complex devices to make daily work easier. Nikola would later say that his inventive ability came not from books, but from watching his mother think. Between a father who believed in God and a mother who believed in ingenuity, Tesla grew up suspended between two worlds, one spiritual, one mechanical. That tension would never leave him. From an early age, Tesla was different, not merely intelligent, unsettlingly so. He could memorize entire books after reading them once. He performed complex calculations in his head without effort. But alongside this brilliance came something stranger. He experienced vivid flashes of light, hallucinations so intense they obscured reality. Images would appear uninvited in his mind. Machines, landscapes, spinning objects, so real he could almost touch them. Sometimes they frightened him. Sometimes they inspired him. He later wrote that as a child, he struggled to distinguish between the world he saw and the world his mind created. Loud sounds triggered bursts of light. Words summoned images without his permission. If someone spoke of a waterfall, he would see it roaring before him. These were not metaphors. They were neurological events, symptoms of a mind wired differently, perhaps too powerfully for its own good. And then came the moment that changed everything. Tesla had an older brother, Dane. Handsome, charismatic, effortlessly talented. In the eyes of family and neighbors, Dane was the brilliant one, the future scholar, the pride of the household. Nikola adored him, but also lived in his shadow. That shadow became permanent when Dane died suddenly in a tragic accident. Accounts vary. Some say he was thrown from a horse, but the result was the same. The family was devastated. Nikola was only 5. The loss carved something deep into him. His parents, consumed by grief, compared him silently to the brother who was gone. Tesla himself believed, whether rationally or not, that he was responsible for the accident. Guilt became his first lifelong companion. It drove him relentlessly, whispering that he must justify his survival, that he must become extraordinary to make sense of the loss. From that point forward, his mind sharpened with almost punishing intensity. He began setting impossible challenges for himself, mental endurance tests, feats of concentration, self-imposed discipline. He trained his memory like a muscle, forced his imagination into obedience, tried to master the visions rather than be overwhelmed by them. But mastery came at a cost. Sleep became irregular. Appetite vanished for days. His body grew thin, fragile, almost translucent, as if the energy inside him burned faster than it could be replenished. Tesla did not play like other children. He observed, he imagined. He built contraptions powered by water, wind, or his own breath. He became obsessed with motion, wheels turning endlessly, forces transferring invisibly from one object to another. Even before he knew the word energy, he was chasing it. And yet, there was fear. Tesla developed intense phobias. He recoiled from germs long before germ theory was common knowledge. He could not stand the sight of pearls. Certain repetitive patterns disturbed him deeply. These compulsions were not quirks. They were symptoms of a mind perpetually on edge, tuned to frequencies most people never sensed. Still, his education continued. He excelled in school, astonishing teachers with his mathematical ability and linguistic fluency. He spoke multiple languages with ease. He absorbed physics and engineering concepts as if remembering them from another life, rather than learning them for the first time. But even as praise followed him, misunderstanding did too. Teachers sometimes accused him of cheating. No one believed a boy could solve such problems so quickly without deception. That disbelief would become a familiar theme. As a teenager, Tesla's health collapsed. He contracted cholera and was bedridden for months, hovering near death. Doctors gave up hope. His father, desperate, promised that if Nikola survived, he would allow him to study engineering instead of theology. Tesla later said that this promise saved his life, not spiritually, but physically. The idea of a future aligned with his true nature pulled him back from the edge. When he recovered, he threw himself into study with ferocity. But even now, destiny resisted him. Financial hardship, academic conflict, and personal instability followed him from school to school. He drank too much. He gambled recklessly. He oscillated between rigid discipline and complete self-destruction, as if testing how much strain his mind and body could endure. Then, one evening, during a walk at sunset, something happened. Tesla was reciting poetry, Goethe's Faust, when the vision struck him. Not a vague idea, but a fully formed machine appeared in his mind. A rotating magnetic field, an electric motor that did not rely on sparks or commutators. Alternating current. He stopped walking. In that moment, the chaos of his inner world aligned. The flashes, the images, the obsessive focus, all of it suddenly made sense. This was not madness, he realized. It was perception. His mind was not broken. It was tuned to tomorrow. Standing there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Tesla understood something profound and terrifying. The future was visible to him in ways it was not visible to others. And once you see the future, you are never allowed to look away. That realization marked the true beginning of Nikola Tesla's journey. Not as a child, not as a student, but as a man destined to change the world and be punished for doing so. Because from that moment forward, his life would no longer belong to him alone. It would belong to the current he had glimpsed, powerful, invisible, unstoppable, and the storm that had welcomed him into the world would finally have a name: electricity. And it was only just beginning to wake up. By the time Nikola Tesla realized his mind was not like other minds, it was already too late to change it. What most people called imagination, Tesla experienced as intrusion. Ideas did not arrive gently. They struck, fully formed, complete, loud. When he closed his eyes, he did not see darkness. He saw movement. Gears spinning, coils humming, forces bending space in silent obedience. These visions were not fantasies waiting to be shaped by trial and error. They were precise, mechanical realities that existed as clearly as the ground beneath his feet. And they would not leave him alone. Tesla soon discovered that he could design an entire machine inside his head, test it, run it, modify it, without ever touching metal or wire. He could watch components wear down, identify points of failure, and improve efficiency, all in a purely mental space. When he finally built these machines in the real world, they worked exactly as he had seen them. To Tesla, this was not a gift. It was a burden. He had to learn, painfully, how to live inside a brain that never shut off. Sleep was not rest, it was interruption. His thoughts raced even as his body collapsed from exhaustion. He slept only a few hours a night, sometimes less, convinced that time spent sleeping was time stolen from discovery. The future was waiting, and he could feel it pressing against him, impatient. At the Polytechnic School in Graz, Tesla's brilliance became impossible to ignore. Professors watched in disbelief as he solved complex equations instantly, correcting their own calculations with quiet confidence. He did not simply understand electrical theory, he questioned its assumptions. While others memorized formulas, Tesla asked why sparks were necessary at all. Why must machines waste energy as heat and noise? Why must power be violent when it could be elegant? These questions unsettled his teachers. Electricity at the time was crude. Sparks, arcs, burning contacts, this was considered normal. Tesla found it offensive. To him, inefficiency was not just technical failure, it was moral failure. Nature did not waste energy. Why should humans? But obsession has gravity. Tesla studied relentlessly, sometimes for days without rest. He memorized entire textbooks, not to recite them, but to dismantle them mentally. And yet, beneath the discipline, cracks formed. He became increasingly rigid in his routines. Everything had to follow numerical patterns, especially multiples of 3. He washed his hands obsessively. He counted steps. He calculated the volume of food before eating it. Any deviation caused anxiety so intense it felt physical. Friends faded away. Relationships became impossible. Tesla did not dislike people. He simply could not slow down enough to exist among them. Conversation felt inefficient. Small talk felt like betrayal of time. Then came the collapse. Tesla began gambling. At first, it was casual, a distraction from the pressure in his mind. But soon, it became compulsive. He chased loss with the same intensity he chased invention. His family intervened. He He promised to stop. He relapsed. Eventually, his academic standing crumbled. Tesla left Graz without graduating, ashamed and drifting, carrying genius without direction. For a time, he disappeared. He worked menial jobs. He wandered. He battled depression so heavy it blurred the edges of existence. The visions did not stop, but now they mocked him. What use were machines that could change the world if he could barely change his own circumstances? And then, in Budapest, something shifted. Tesla found work at the Central Telegraph Office. It was not glamorous, but it placed him near machinery again. Real systems, real signals. And it was here, during a walk in a city park at sunset, that the moment arrived. The sky burned orange. Tesla recited Goethe's Faust, the words flowing automatically, when suddenly his mind ignited. He stopped mid-step. A rotating magnetic field appeared before him. Not abstract, not symbolic, but exact. He saw currents alternating in perfect rhythm, generating motion without sparks, without friction, without waste. He grabbed a stick and began drawing diagrams in the dirt. The induction motor. This was not improvement. It was revolution. At that moment, Tesla understood what others could not yet imagine. Alternating current could do what direct current never could. It could travel farther. It could scale. It could power entire cities. And it could do so cleanly, efficiently, almost gracefully. But realization did not bring relief. It brought urgency. Tesla knew the idea was fragile, not because it was wrong, but because the world was not ready. Powerful men had invested fortunes in direct current. Infrastructure was already being built. Careers depended on the old way. Tesla had discovered the future, but the present was hostile territory. He needed resources. He needed industry. He needed a place where ambition burned hot enough to match his own. He needed America. By 1884, Tesla had little more than a suitcase, a head full of machines, and a letter of introduction. The letter was addressed to the most famous inventor alive, Thomas Alva Edison. It read, in part, "I know two great men, and you are one of them. The other is this young man." When Tesla arrived in New York Harbor, the city rose before him like a machine already in motion. Smoke, steam, noise, power lines strung like veins across the skyline. It was thrilling and deeply disappointing. Electricity here was brute force, inelegant, wasteful, everything Tesla despised. But this was where decisions were made. He found Edison shortly after arriving. The meeting was brief, awkward, charged. Edison was practical, intuitive, suspicious of theory. Tesla was precise, distant, radiating certainty. They did not speak the same intellectual language, but they needed each other. Edison hired Tesla. At first, Tesla worked tirelessly. He redesigned generators, improved efficiency, solved problems others could not. He worked through nights, barely stopping to eat. Edison promised him a large bonus if he could dramatically improve the company's direct current systems. Tesla delivered. When he asked for the promised reward, Edison laughed. "You don't understand our American humor," he said. The bonus never came. Something inside Tesla snapped, not violently, but permanently. He realized then that innovation alone was not enough. Vision meant nothing without power, and power, in America, belonged not to those who saw the future, but to those who owned it. Tesla quit. He walked out of Edison's company with nothing. No money, no reputation, no allies. Once again, he was alone. But this time, he carried something different within him. Not just ideas, but certainty. He knew alternating current would win. Not because it was profitable, but because it was inevitable. Nature favored it. Physics demanded it. The storm inside his mind had finally found direction. And as Tesla stepped back into the streets of New York, destitute, exhausted, unrecognized, the war for the future quietly began. Because once a man has seen tomorrow, he does not need permission to build it. He only needs time. And time, as Tesla would soon learn, is the most expensive currency of all. New York did not notice when Nikola Tesla fell. The city was too loud, too hungry, too obsessed with motion to pause for a man who walked its streets with empty pockets and a head full of invisible machines. Elevated trains screamed overhead. Horse-drawn carriages splashed through mud. Electric lights flickered unreliably, glowing with the crude confidence of a technology still learning how to exist. Power was everywhere, but none of it belonged to him. Tesla had arrived believing America was the land where ideas became reality. What he discovered instead was that ideas meant nothing without ownership. After leaving Edison's company, Tesla did not immediately find another laboratory. He found a shovel. To survive, he worked as a manual laborer, digging ditches for underground cables, handling the very infrastructure of electricity with his hands, while the designs that could improve it burned uselessly in his mind. Each strike of the shovel felt like an insult, not to his pride, but to the future itself. He knew how much energy was being wasted. He knew how much far the power could travel. And yet, no one asked. At night, exhausted and filthy, Tesla returned to cheap lodging houses. Sleep came in fragments. His mind refused rest, replaying the rotating magnetic fields he had seen years earlier. He feared forgetting them, not because they would disappear, but because no one else would ever believe they existed. Then, almost by accident, opportunity found him. Two investors, Alfred S. Brown and Charles K. F. Peck, noticed Tesla while he was repairing electrical equipment. Unlike most, they listened. Tesla did not pitch cautiously. He spoke with the calm confidence of someone describing something inevitable. Alternating current, he explained, was not a gamble. It was the natural evolution of power. It could transmit electricity over long distances without catastrophic loss. It could scale beyond neighborhoods, beyond cities. It could electrify the world. Brown and Peck funded the Tesla Electric Company. For the first time, Tesla had a laboratory of his own. Inside that modest workspace on South Fifth Avenue, he began turning visions into metal, induction motors, transformers, systems that converted alternating current into controlled, usable force. He filed patents rapidly, dozens of them, each one locking another piece of the future into legal reality. And the world began to notice. One man noticed more than anyone else. George Westinghouse. Where Edison was territorial and instinctive, Westinghouse was strategic. He understood scale. He saw infrastructure not as invention, but as empire. When Westinghouse examined Tesla's patents, he immediately grasped what Edison refused to acknowledge. Direct current was a dead end. Westinghouse bought Tesla's patents outright and offered him royalties on every horsepower generated using his system. It was a fortune waiting to happen. For Tesla, it was vindication. For the first time, someone with power recognized the power of his ideas. But progress does not happen quietly. The war of currents had begun. Edison, heavily invested in direct current, launched a campaign of fear. Alternating current, he claimed, was dangerous, deadly, uncontrollable. He staged public demonstrations electrocuting animals to prove his point. He backed the electric chair as a method of execution, ensuring that AC would be associated with death in the public mind. Tesla watched this with growing horror. Electricity, to him, was not a weapon. It was a life force. To see it twisted into propaganda felt like sacrilege. But he was not a businessman, nor a politician. He did not fight with headlines. He fought with demonstrations. At the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Tesla and Westinghouse seized the moment. They illuminated the fairgrounds with alternating current, hundreds of thousands of lights blazing into the night. Visitors gasped. The darkness surrendered. The future revealed itself in incandescent clarity. Tesla stood before audiences, allowing electricity to pass harmlessly through his body, lighting lamps held in his hands. He appeared almost supernatural, calm amid crackling arcs of power. He spoke softly, letting the spectacle speak for him. This was not destruction. This was control. The world was convinced. Soon after, Tesla's system was chosen to harness the power of Niagara Falls, one of the greatest engineering challenges of the era. When the generators roared to life, transmitting electricity miles away to Buffalo, it was over. Alternating current had won. And yet, Tesla did not celebrate. As Westinghouse's company struggled financially, Tesla made a decision that would haunt history. To save the company and ensure the survival of AC, he tore up his royalty contract. Millions, possibly billions, vanished with a signature. He did it without hesitation. Money, Tesla believed, was temporary. Progress was eternal. But the world does not reward sacrifice equally. As AC became standard across the globe, Tesla's name faded behind corporate logos and industrial giants. Westinghouse thrived. Cities glowed. Factories hummed. The modern age ignited. And Tesla moved on. Because while the world marveled at electricity delivered by wires, Tesla had already grown bored of wires altogether. He was thinking about power without connection, energy transmitted through the air, communication without cables, a planet humming at the same frequency. Tomorrow was calling again, and once more Tesla would follow it, no matter how far it pulled him from the present. As the lights of America burned brighter than ever, the man who made them possible began to drift toward an idea so ambitious, so radical, that even victory would not protect him. Because the greatest danger to Nikola Tesla was never failure. It was always the next idea. Victory did not arrive with applause. It arrived quietly, disguised as normalcy. Alternating current slipped into the world not as a revolution, but as infrastructure, hidden in walls, buried underground, humming invisibly behind the routines of daily life. Lights turned on. Factories ran longer. Cities expanded outward instead of upward. And most people never asked how it happened, or who had made it possible. Nikola Tesla watched this transformation with a strange detachment. The war of currents was technically over. Direct current had lost. The physics were undeniable. Distance favored alternating current. Efficiency demanded it. The future had chosen. But wars leave scars even after the fighting stops, and Tesla carried his quietly. Thomas Edison retreated into other ventures, his reputation intact, his fortune secure. George Westinghouse became an industrial titan. Investors congratulated themselves for backing the winning side. And Tesla returned to his laboratory, already chasing ideas so far ahead that even his greatest triumph felt obsolete. He was not interested in powering cities anymore. He was interested in liberating them. To Tesla, wires were a compromise, not a solution. They tethered humanity to geography, to copper, to centralized control. True progress, he believed, would only arrive when energy could be transmitted freely, without physical connection, without ownership, without borders. Wireless power. The idea sounded impossible. To Tesla, it was obvious. He understood the Earth not as inert rock, but as a conductor, a vast resonant system capable of carrying energy if properly excited. He believed the planet itself could be turned into a transmitter, pulsing power across continents. Not metaphorically. Literally. This belief consumed him. He began experimenting with high-frequency currents, pushing electricity beyond anything safely understood at the time. Voltages climbed into the millions. Sparks leapt through the air like living creatures. His laboratory became a place of controlled chaos, where conventional safety rules dissolved under the authority of understanding. Visitors described entering Tesla's lab as stepping into another world. The smell of ozone, the constant crackle of discharge, machines that screamed at frequencies too high to hear but too powerful to ignore. Tesla moved through it all calmly, methodically, like a conductor leading an orchestra no one else could hear. And then came the rumors. Stories spread of Tesla conjuring lightning indoors, of him standing calmly as bolts arced around his body, of machines that shattered glass across the street. Newspapers exaggerated. The public whispered. Was he a scientist, or something else entirely? Tesla did nothing to correct them. In 1899, driven by the need for space and isolation, he left New York for Colorado Springs. There, beneath wide skies and frequent natural lightning, he built his most extreme laboratory yet. A massive magnifying transmitter rose from the ground, designed to push energy into the Earth itself. When Tesla powered it on, the results were terrifying and magnificent. Lightning bolts over 100 feet long erupted from the structure. Thunder shook the town. Power stations miles away malfunctioned. Residents feared the end of the world. Tesla, meanwhile, took notes. He claimed to have lit bulbs wirelessly from a distance, to have detected standing waves in the earth, to have received mysterious signals, regular repeating pulses, that he speculated might not be natural at all. Some dismissed this as fantasy. Others feared it was delusion. Tesla did not care. He believed he was on the verge of something absolute. A discovery so complete it would erase scarcity itself. Free energy for all. Communication across the globe. A world synchronized not by politics, but by frequency. But belief does not pay for materials. When Tesla returned to New York, he carried not only data, but obsession. He approached financiers with grand visions, wireless power stations, global communication networks, a planet made luminous by shared energy. Most smiled politely and declined. The risks were too great. The returns too uncertain. Except one. J.P. Morgan. Morgan was cautious, calculating, accustomed to backing winners. He agreed to fund Tesla's new project, not because he believed in free energy, but because he believed in control. Wireless communication, Morgan understood, could be monetized. Information could be owned. Signals could be sold. Tesla, eager and perhaps naive, accepted the funding. On Long Island, Wardenclyffe Tower began to rise, a skeletal monument of steel and wood, crowned with a massive dome. To the public, it was a radio station. To Tesla, it was something far greater, a prototype for planetary energy transmission. As construction progressed, Tesla quietly altered the design. He expanded its purpose. He began preparing it not just to send messages, but to transmit power itself. Morgan noticed. When he learned that Tesla intended to give energy away, freely, without meters or payment, his support vanished. "If anyone can draw power," Morgan allegedly asked, "where do we put the meter?" Funding stopped. Construction stalled. Tesla scrambled, desperate to finish before momentum died. But debt mounted. Creditors circled. The tower stood incomplete, a promise suspended in air. And the world moved on. Radio emerged under other names. Marconi took credit for inventions Tesla had patented years earlier. Courts would eventually recognize Tesla's priority, but recognition, once delayed, rarely feels like justice. Wardenclyffe was dismantled piece by piece. The tower that might have changed civilization was torn down for scrap. Tesla watched as his life's work disappeared, not in flame, but in silence. This was not the first time the future had slipped through his hands, but it was the most painful. The War of Currents had taught Tesla a brutal lesson. Winning the scientific argument did not mean winning the world. Progress did not belong to those who imagined it best, but to those who controlled its distribution. And still, he refused to compromise. As the 20th century advanced, toward automobiles, airplanes, and global conflict, Tesla retreated further from industry and deeper into theory. His ideas grew larger, stranger, more dangerous. He spoke of weapons that could end war forever, of machines that could see across continents, of energy so concentrated it could collapse armies. Once, people had laughed at alternating current. Now, they were afraid to listen. The war he was fighting was no longer about electricity. It was about belief. And Nikola Tesla was beginning to realize that the world might never be ready for what he knew, no matter how desperately it needed it. Because the greatest inventions do not just change technology, they change power. And power never surrenders without a fight. In Colorado Springs, the sky felt closer. It stretched wider, darker, more alive than anything Tesla had known in New York. Thunderstorms rolled across the plains with terrifying beauty, lightning tearing open the heavens again and again, as if the atmosphere itself were rehearsing something ancient and violent. For most people, these storms were something to hide from. For Tesla, they were an invitation. He chose Colorado Springs deliberately. The altitude, the dry air, the natural electrical activity, this was not escape. It was alignment. If he was going to speak to the earth, he needed to be somewhere it listened most closely. The laboratory he built there looked almost fragile against the vastness of the land. A wooden structure, a tall mast rising into the sky. But inside, it housed machines unlike anything the world had seen. Coils larger than wagons, capacitors charged beyond accepted limits. Instruments pushed so far past their tolerances that even seasoned engineers would have refused to power them on. Tesla did not hesitate. When he activated the magnifying transmitter, the ground itself seemed to respond. Sparks leapt not inches, but yards. Bolts of electricity cracked through the air with the force of artillery fire. Thunder echoed across the plains, not from clouds, but from a man-made source. The smell of ozone clung to everything. Residents miles away reported strange phenomena, lights glowing without wires, metal objects vibrating, power systems malfunctioning. One generator at the local utility station burned out entirely, plunging parts of the town into darkness. Tesla reportedly smiled. To him, this was confirmation. Proof that energy could be injected into the earth and drawn out elsewhere. Proof that distance was an illusion. Proof that wires were unnecessary. Night after night, he worked alone. Tesla slept little, sometimes not at all. He kept meticulous notes, writing by lamplight as lightning erupted overhead, as if the sky itself were annotating his work. He measured frequencies, he tuned resonances, he listened, not with his ears, but with instruments, with intuition, with a sensitivity that bordered on the mystical. And then, one night, he claimed something extraordinary. While monitoring signals from his equipment, Tesla detected a pattern, repeating, deliberate, unmistakably structured. It did not resemble atmospheric noise. It did not match known terrestrial sources. The pulses were rhythmic, intentional. He believed he was receiving a transmission, not from another city, not from another country, but from beyond Earth. Tesla announced this carefully, almost reluctantly. He did not claim certainty, only possibility. But the reaction was immediate and unforgiving. Newspapers sensationalized it. Critics mocked him. Fellow scientists distanced themselves. The line between visionary and madman, always thin, suddenly felt razor sharp. Tesla was unbothered. To him, the universe was alive with energy. Why would intelligence be confined to a single planet? Why would communication stop at the atmosphere? If electricity could travel through the Earth, why not through space? These questions did not frighten him. What frightened him was how small everyone else's questions had become. Colorado Springs marked a turning point. Tesla was no longer merely improving existing systems. He was rewriting assumptions, and rewriting assumptions makes people nervous, especially those whose power depends on the old ones remaining intact. When he returned to New York, he carried data that could have reshaped civilization. But he also carried something heavier. A reputation that had begun to fracture. Investors listened with polite smiles and guarded eyes. Journalists focused on spectacle rather than substance. The word eccentric followed him like a shadow. Still, Tesla pressed forward. Wardenclyffe was born from Colorado Springs. The tower was meant to be the practical application of everything he had learned. A global transmitter capable of wireless communication and power. Tesla imagined ships navigating by signals from shore, messages crossing oceans instantly, energy flowing freely across continents. But as the tower rose, so did suspicion. Financiers wanted profit. Governments wanted control. Tesla wanted liberation. These goals were not compatible. Behind closed doors, whispers circulated. Tesla was dangerous. Unpredictable. Too idealistic. Too convinced of his own vision. The same mind that had given the world alternating current was now proposing something far more disruptive. A world without scarcity. A world without centralized power. A world without permission. When funding faltered, Tesla grew desperate. He worked harder, slept less, pushed himself beyond reason. He refused to scale back the project, refused to compromise its purpose. To do so would be to betray the future itself. But the future does not arrive on conviction alone. Construction slowed. Materials stopped coming. Wardenclyffe became a half-finished skeleton, looming against the sky like a question no one wanted to answer. Tesla continued to believe he could still complete it, if only given time, if only given trust. Neither came. As the tower stalled, so did Tesla's standing in the scientific community. Others took credit for ideas he had pioneered. New technologies emerged that echoed his concepts but bore different names. History began quietly rearranging itself around him. And Tesla retreated inward. He spoke less publicly. He wrote more privately. His ideas grew more extreme, more absolute. He began to see technology not just as progress, but as moral force. He believed war could be eliminated by making it obsolete, by creating weapons so powerful they would never need to be used. The irony was cruel. The man who dreamed of free energy for all was now being remembered for theories of destruction. The gentle precision of his early work was overshadowed by the fear his later ideas inspired. And yet, Tesla himself did not change. He remained convinced that humanity stood at the edge of something transformative, and that fear, not physics, was holding it back. He believed history would eventually correct itself, that truth, delayed, would still arrive. But as the 20th century accelerated toward conflict and consolidation, Tesla's role diminished. The storm that had once announced his birth now seemed to follow him in another form. Unpredictable, uncontrollable, misunderstood. He had touched lightning. He had bent it to his will. But lightning, once released, does not ask permission before it strikes. And Nikola Tesla was beginning to realize that in giving the world its power, he may have lost his own. Wardenclyffe did not fail all at once. It failed slowly, painfully, the way dreams usually do. Not with collapse, but with quiet erosion. Each missing payment, each delayed shipment, each unanswered letter, each polite refusal that sounded reasonable on the surface and fatal underneath. The tower stood on Long Island like a question aimed at the sky. From a distance, it looked almost mythic. A lattice of steel rising from the earth, crowned with a great wooden dome, as if designed to hold the heavens in place. To passers-by, it was a curiosity. To Tesla, it was the nervous system of a new world. He walked the grounds daily, inspecting every bolt, every cable, every alignment. In his mind, Wardenclyffe was already alive. Energy flowed through it. Signals leapt across oceans. Cities pulsed in harmony. Humanity stepped into an age where distance no longer mattered. But imagination, no matter how precise, could not replace capital. At first, J.P. Morgan's support had seemed solid. Morgan was not a man who gambled lightly. He backed enterprises that bent markets to his will. Railroads, steel, finance itself. When he agreed to fund Tesla, it felt like destiny aligning at last. Genius and power finally working together. But their partnership was built on a misunderstanding. Morgan believed he was financing a wireless communication system, a better radio, faster messages, profitable infrastructure. Tesla, meanwhile, believed he was building the foundation of a planetary energy network, a system that would transmit not just information, but power itself, freely, universally. For Tesla, this distinction was not negotiable. He did not see energy as a commodity. He saw it as a birthright. The sun did not charge for its light. The earth did not bill for gravity. Electricity, he believed, should be the same, abundant, accessible, unowned. This philosophy terrified investors. When Morgan realized that Tesla's vision left no room for meters, no way to control distribution, no mechanism to enforce payment, his enthusiasm cooled instantly. Progress was acceptable. Liberation was not. The funding stopped. Tesla tried to explain. He wrote letters filled with equations and conviction, insisting that once operational, Wardenclyffe would make its value undeniable. He promised returns, not just financial, but civilizational. Morgan did not respond. Construction slowed to a crawl. Workers left. Creditors appeared. The tower rose no further. The dome remained unfinished. A crown without a kingdom. Tesla, once celebrated as the man who electrified the world, now wandered his own project site alone, arguing with bankers, bargaining with suppliers, stretching dwindling resources with desperate ingenuity. He sold personal belongings. He delayed payments. He borrowed against patents already exploited by others. Pride dissolved into necessity. Still, he refused to abandon the tower. Wardenclyffe was not just a machine. It was proof that his life's trajectory, every sacrifice, every humiliation, every missed fortune, had meaning. If it worked, everything would be justified. The past would reorganize itself around the future he had delivered. But time was no longer on his side. Meanwhile, the world changed without him. Guglielmo Marconi transmitted radio signals across the Atlantic and was hailed as a pioneer. Tesla watched in disbelief as headlines celebrated achievements built on principles he had patented years earlier. Court battles would come later, slow and unsatisfying. Recognition delayed is recognition diluted. Tesla did not fight loudly. He never learned how. He believed truth would assert itself eventually, that history would correct its errors, that the elegance of his ideas would outlast the noise of misattribution. History, however, is impatient. As the 20th century advanced, attention shifted toward industrialization, militarization, and profit. Technologies that could be weaponized or monetized thrived. Those that promised universal access struggled to survive. Wardenclyffe belonged to the latter. In 1906, Tesla was forced to shut down operations entirely. The tower stood inert, a silent accusation against a world that lacked the courage, or the incentive, to finish what it had started. Years passed. The structure decayed. Rust crept in where lightning was meant to dance. Eventually, creditors demanded liquidation. In 1917, during the chaos of World War I, Wardenclyffe Tower was demolished. Officially, it was dismantled for scrap. Unofficially, some claimed the government feared it could be used as a navigational aid for enemy submarines. Tesla was not consulted. He watched the destruction from a distance. There was no dramatic protest, no public outcry, no final speech, just a man standing silently as the physical embodiment of his greatest dream was reduced to rubble. Decades of thought, years of obsession, erased in weeks. Something in Tesla broke that day. Not his intellect, not his curiosity, but his belief that the world could be reasoned with. After Wardenclyffe, Tesla never truly recovered his footing. He continued to invent, to theorize, to write, but the momentum was gone. The center had shifted. He was no longer shaping the future. He was predicting it from the margins. He moved from hotel to hotel, living on credit, relying on fading goodwill. He gave interviews that sounded increasingly prophetic and increasingly unmoored. He spoke of technologies that could end war, of beams of energy that could strike from thousands of miles away, of machines capable of seeing through walls. Once, such claims might have been greeted with awe. Now, they were met with skepticism or fear. The tragedy of Wardenclyffe was not that it failed. It was that it succeeded too early, in a world structurally incapable of allowing it to exist. Tesla had built a machine for a civilization that did not yet value equality over control, access over ownership, abundance over profit. His mistake was not technical, it was philosophical. As the tower fell, so too did Tesla's place at the center of innovation. The man who had powered the modern age was quietly pushed to its edges, his contributions absorbed, repackaged, and sold by others. And yet, even in loss, Tesla did not regret his vision. He had seen what was possible. And once you see that, compromise feels like betrayal. The future, he believed, would eventually return to Wardenclyffe's principles, even if it forgot the tower itself, even if it forgot him. But as he drifted further into isolation, one question lingered, unanswered and increasingly uncomfortable. What happens to a man who invents tomorrow? When tomorrow refuses to arrive? The answer was waiting, and it would not be kind. After Wardenclyffe, the world did not confront Nikola Tesla. It simply moved past him. There was no trial, no formal rejection, no single moment where a door slammed shut. Instead, invitations stopped arriving. Funding dried up. Laboratories went silent. Tesla, once courted by financiers and journalists alike, now existed in a strange limbo, famous enough to be recognized, irrelevant enough to be ignored. And yet, his mind did not slow down. If anything, it accelerated. Freed from the constraints of investors and construction schedules, Tesla retreated fully into theory. He no longer focused on what could be built immediately. He focused on what must exist eventually. His ideas grew larger, more absolute, less concerned with feasibility and more concerned with inevitability. He became convinced that the greatest failure of civilization was war, not as a moral evil, but as a technical one. Wars happened, Tesla believed, because distance still existed, because nations could attack without consequence, because power was unevenly distributed. Remove distance, equalize power, make aggression impossible. This was the logic that led him to his most controversial concept, the weapon the newspapers would later call the death ray. Tesla never liked the term. It was crude, sensational, inaccurate. What he envisioned was not a ray of death, but a defensive system. A focused stream of charged particles capable of disabling aircraft or armies at great distances. An impenetrable shield. A technological stalemate so absolute that war itself would become obsolete. He called it Teleforce. To Tesla, it was the logical extension of everything he had already done. If energy could be transmitted wirelessly, it could be concentrated. If it could be concentrated, it could be controlled. And if it could be controlled perfectly, it could deter violence without ever being used. But the world heard only one word: weapon. Journalists pounced. Headlines exaggerated. Governments grew interested, but cautiously, quietly. Tesla was invited to meetings where little was said and much was implied. Officials listened, took notes, asked just enough questions to measure the danger. Then they stepped back. Tesla was too unpredictable, too idealistic, too unwilling to relinquish control. He wanted his invention to belong to all nations equally, to prevent war universally. No single government could own it. No single power could monopolize it. That made him unacceptable. In an age racing toward mechanized warfare, Tesla was offering peace without dominance. It did not fit the psychology of the moment. So instead of funding his work, governments watched him. Files were opened. Observations were made. Tesla noticed men lingering near his hotel rooms, questions asked by strangers who never gave names. He did not fear them. He found them inefficient. What frightened him was something else entirely. He realized he was running out of time. Tesla was aging. His health was deteriorating. Years of sleeplessness, malnutrition, and stress had taken their toll. He walked more slowly. His hands sometimes trembled. But his mind remained sharp, relentlessly so. He began publishing statements that sounded less like proposals and more like warnings. He spoke of energy weapons that could destroy cities if misused, of technologies capable of surveillance beyond imagination, of a future where invention would outpace ethics. Few listened. The world was entering the First World War, and ethics were already a casualty. As nations mobilized, Tesla watched with profound sadness. He believed his work could have prevented this, that if Wardenclyffe had been completed, if communication had been instantaneous and global, if energy had been free and universal, the incentives for war might have dissolved. Instead, his ideas were being ignored, while others built machines designed solely to kill more efficiently. This realization isolated him further. Tesla withdrew socially. He avoided gatherings. He stopped trusting casual conversations. He became increasingly careful with what he revealed publicly, convinced that fragments of his ideas could be misused by those who did not understand or care about their consequences. The man who once demonstrated electricity by letting it flow harmlessly through his body now guarded his thoughts like state secrets. Ironically, this secrecy fed the very rumors that undermined him. To the public, Tesla became a curiosity, an eccentric genius, a brilliant mind gone too far. Newspapers portrayed him as a relic of a bygone era, clinging to relevance through increasingly grandiose claims. They did not see the irony. They were already living in the world he had imagined. Radio, remote control, wireless communication, technologies Tesla had demonstrated years earlier were now mainstream, credited to others, integrated so seamlessly that no one questioned their origins. The future was arriving quietly, stripped of his name. And Tesla watched it unfold from the sidelines. He took solace in small routines, long walks, careful meals measured obsessively, feeding pigeons in the park, creatures he grew deeply attached to, perhaps because they asked nothing of him but presence. He spoke to them softly, with the same precision he once reserved for machines. One pigeon, a white one, became especially important to him. Tesla claimed to love it as one loves a person. When it died, something inside him seemed to extinguish. When that pigeon died, he later said, something went out of my life. It was a rare admission of loss. By the late 1920s and 1930s, Tesla was no longer shaping public discourse. He was reacting to it. Commenting on technologies that echoed his early work, warning about directions he believed humanity was rushing toward blindly. Few took him seriously, and yet, behind the scenes, interest never fully disappeared. Government agencies quietly kept track of him, his papers, his statements, his hotel addresses, not because he was irrelevant, but because he might not be. Tesla had become a paradox, too brilliant to ignore, too uncontrollable to support, too ahead of his time to belong anywhere comfortably. He was a man who knew too much in a world that preferred ignorance to inconvenience. And as the decades wore on, as younger inventors replaced him in the public imagination, Tesla's isolation deepened. His legacy fractured, part prophet, part cautionary tale, part forgotten footnote. But the most unsettling truth was this: the ideas that made people uneasy were not the ones he had already revealed. They were the ones he hadn't, locked away in notebooks, stored in trunks, carried silently in a mind that had learned, the hard way, what happens when the future is shared too freely. As the world edged closer to another global conflict, and Tesla edged closer to the end of his life, an unspoken question hung in the air. What knowledge dies with the man who refused to sell tomorrow? The answer would not come immediately. It would arrive behind a locked door. By the time Nikola Tesla reached his 70s, the world knew his face, but not his reality. Newspapers still printed his name on his birthday. Scientific societies invited him to banquets. Photographers captured him seated stiffly beside younger men who owed their careers to principles he had established decades earlier. The applause was polite, ceremonial, detached. Tesla accepted it with quiet dignity, as if attending his own memorial while still alive. When the celebrations ended, he returned alone to his hotel room. Tesla no longer owned a home. He moved between hotels like a ghost, passing through corridors of temporary kindness. Management tolerated him out of respect, sometimes out of pity, often out of the lingering prestige attached to his name. Bills were deferred. Rooms grew smaller. Comfort diminished. His belongings fit into trunks that followed him from address to address, containing notebooks no one was allowed to open and clothes worn thin by repetition. He lived carefully. Every meal was calculated, every movement deliberate. His habits, once described as eccentric, now bordered on ritualistic necessity. He avoided physical contact. He washed his hands compulsively. He demanded exact measurements from waiters and refused food that violated his internal arithmetic. To outsiders, it looked like obsession. To Tesla, it was control. The last defense against a world that had taken everything else. And yet, despite the isolation, Tesla remained famous. Journalists sought him out whenever technology advanced or war loomed. They asked him to comment on radio, aviation, robotics, radar, energy weapons. Tesla answered thoughtfully, often prophetically. He spoke of automation replacing human labor, of machines guided by logic rather than instinct, of a future where humanity would struggle not with scarcity, but with purpose. Many of his predictions were uncannily accurate. Few were credited. He watched as younger inventors became household names, backed by corporations, celebrated for incremental advances built atop foundations he had laid in obscurity. Tesla did not resent them personally. He resented the system that rewarded packaging over insight, timing over truth. Occasionally, companies paid his hotel bills in exchange for the right to associate themselves with his name. It was a quiet arrangement, a symbolic gesture. Tesla accepted without protest. Pride had long since been replaced by survival. What hurt more than poverty was irrelevance. Tesla understood that his ideas were still ahead of their time, but he also sensed that time was accelerating beyond his ability to keep pace. The world he had imagined was arriving through paths he did not choose, controlled by institutions he distrusted. Wireless communication was everywhere, but not wireless power. Automation advanced, but without ethical oversight. Energy spread, but remained centralized, monetized, weaponized. The future had arrived crooked. Tesla's health declined steadily. His once precise frame grew fragile. He walked with difficulty, his voice softened. But his eyes, sharp, penetrating, restless, never lost their intensity. Those who spoke with him privately often left unsettled, convinced they had just spoken to someone who understood things they did not. He spent hours feeding pigeons in Bryant Park, carefully selecting food, memorizing individual birds. The pigeons became his companions, perhaps because they asked no explanations, demanded no proof. They accepted him without question. One pigeon, in particular, became everything. White, luminous, injured once, then nursed back to health by Tesla himself. He spoke of it with a tenderness reserved for no human being. When it flew to his window at night, he felt peace. When it failed to return, he felt dread. When it finally died, Tesla wept. He said later that he had loved that pigeon as one loves a woman, that its death marked the end of his life's emotional core. Afterward, something essential withdrew. The future still existed in his mind, but the will to fight for it diminished. Meanwhile, the world edged closer to another war. Governments quietly revisited Tesla's more dangerous ideas. They asked again about energy weapons, about beams, about remote destruction. Tesla, now cautious, answered ambiguously. He had learned that knowledge shared without context becomes violence, and so he guarded what remained. By the early 1940s, Tesla was living almost entirely on credit, sustained by deferred bills and fading prestige. He celebrated his birthdays alone, giving statements to the press that read like final testaments. He spoke of technologies that could reshape warfare and peace alike, but always with the same warning. Without moral advancement, technical progress would only magnify humanity's worst instincts. Few listened. The world was too busy preparing to destroy itself again. On January 7, 1943, a hotel maid knocked on the door of room 3327 at the New Yorker Hotel. There was no answer. She returned later. Still nothing. Eventually, the door was opened. Nikola Tesla lay on the bed, fully clothed, hands crossed, as if prepared. He was 86 years old. He had died alone. But he had not died unnoticed. Within hours, officials arrived. The room was sealed. His belongings were inventoried. Trunks were removed. Papers were examined. Some were returned. Some were not. The world would later debate what was taken and why. But at that moment, one truth was unavoidable. The man who had given the world its power had died without any of it. Famous but poor. Celebrated but unheard. Revered but misunderstood. And as the door to room 3327 closed, history stood on the edge of a question it had avoided for decades. What, exactly, had Nikola Tesla taken with him when he left? The answer would shape the legend that followed and blur the line between history and silence. The door to room 3037 closed softly. Inside, the air was still. No hum of machinery, no crackle of energy. Just the quiet finality of a life that had burned hotter than almost any other, and ended without ceremony. Nikola Tesla's body lay exactly where it had been found, as if he had arranged himself deliberately, one last act of control in a world that had long denied him any. But death did not bring silence. It brought attention. Within hours of Tesla's passing, the atmosphere around the New Yorker hotel changed. Word moved quickly, not through newspapers at first, but through corridors of authority. Government officials arrived. Not local police alone, but representatives from federal agencies. The room was sealed. The trunks Tesla had guarded for years were no longer private. This was not routine. Tesla was not just an old inventor who had died quietly in a hotel room. He was a man who had spent decades talking about weapons that could alter the balance of power, about energy systems that defied conventional infrastructure, about technologies that governments had never fully understood, but never fully dismissed either. And now, whatever he knew was unprotected. Agents inventoried his belongings meticulously. Papers were examined, notebooks flipped through, diagrams studied by men who did not share the mind that created them. Some documents were deemed harmless. Others were classified immediately. The Office of Alien Property Custodian took control of Tesla's estate. Not because he was an enemy, but because he was foreign-born and his ideas were considered potentially dangerous. The justification was simple: national security. Tesla's nephew, Sava Kosanovich, protested. Scientists protested. Admirers protested. Eventually, Some materials were returned to the family, others were not. Officially, the government claimed nothing of practical value was found. No working weapon, no complete plans, no immediate threat. Unofficially, rumors ignited like dry grass. What had Tesla really been working on in his final years? What exactly had been removed from those trunks? And why the urgency? Stories spread of missing notebooks, vanished schematics, suppressed breakthroughs. Conspiracy layered itself over uncertainty. Tesla, in death, became larger than he had ever been alive. Some claimed the United States quietly absorbed his ideas into classified weapons programs. Others insisted nothing usable existed, that Tesla's later work had been too theoretical, too incomplete. Both explanations missed something essential. Tesla did not think in blueprints alone. He thought in systems, even fragments of his thinking, partial equations, unfinished concepts, could be dangerous or transformative in the wrong hands. He understood energy at scales few ever approached. He spoke casually about concentrating power across distances that modern engineers still struggle to manage. Whether or not his final ideas were practical is almost beside the point. The fear was that they might be. In the months following his death, Tesla faded from public conversation. War dominated headlines. The world had no time for eccentric geniuses of the past. And yet, beneath the surface, his name lingered, circulating quietly among engineers, physicists, intelligence analysts. A man like Tesla does not disappear cleanly. Court battles followed. In 1943, the US Supreme Court finally acknowledged Tesla's priority in radio technology, overturning earlier patents. It was a hollow victory. Recognition arrived after relevance, justice after erasure. Tesla did not live to hear it. What remained was a question of legacy and a problem of interpretation. Was Tesla a misunderstood prophet, punished for seeing too far ahead? Or was he a brilliant engineer whose later years drifted into abstraction? Were his warnings about future technologies cautionary wisdom, or the echoes of isolation? History struggled to decide. What is certain is this: Tesla died believing the world had chosen the wrong path. He believed progress had become entangled with profit, power, and warfare. He believed humanity was using technology to amplify its instincts rather than refine them. And in that belief, he may have been more accurate than anyone wanted to admit. As decades passed, technologies emerged that mirrored his predictions with unsettling precision. Directed energy research, wireless power experiments, autonomous machines, surveillance systems operating at scales Tesla once warned about. The future he described did not die with him. It simply arrived without credit. Room 3327 was eventually rented to someone else. The hotel moved on. The city continued humming with electricity, powered by principles Tesla had unlocked generations earlier. Most people never knew the room's number. Few knew what had been taken from it. But the absence remained. Tesla's death did not end his influence. It fractured it, scattering pieces across institutions, inventions, and myths. Some of his ideas were absorbed quietly into progress. Others became legends. A few remain unresolved, lingering at the edge of plausibility, waiting for a world advanced enough and cautious enough to revisit them. And that is the most unsettling part. Not that Tesla may have taken secrets to the grave, but that he may have left them behind, hidden in plain sight, in a future that still does not fully understand the man who invented it. Which brings us to the final question. What does it mean to inherit a world shaped by someone we failed to listen to? To answer that, we have to step out of room 3327 and into the present. The world Nikola Tesla imagined no longer sounds impossible. Wireless communication encircles the planet. Electricity flows across continents. Machines think, decide, and act without human hands guiding every step. Energy is harvested from wind, sun, and water. Information moves faster than any army ever could. Humanity lives inside systems Tesla described when most of the world still feared light bulbs. And yet, his name is still spoken like a mystery. Tesla once said that the present belongs to others, but the future is his. For decades, that sounded like arrogance or fantasy. Now it reads like understatement. The question is no longer whether he was right. The question is what it cost him to be right too early. In the modern world, engineers experiment with wireless power transmission, cautiously revisiting ideas Tesla pursued with fearless intensity. Satellites beam energy. Devices charge without cords. The Earth itself is studied as a resonant system, just as Tesla proposed more than a century ago. Each breakthrough inches closer to Wardenclyffe's original promise, while quietly avoiding its most radical implication, that energy could belong to everyone. Automation reshapes labor. Algorithms replace routine thinking. Machines operate autonomously across land, sea, and air. Tesla predicted this too. He believed robots would one day perform most physical labor, freeing humans for higher pursuits. What he feared was not automation, but a society unprepared to redefine meaning when work disappears. That fear feels uncomfortably current. Tesla's warnings about weaponized technology echo even louder. Directed energy weapons are researched. Remote warfare is normalized. Distance, once a barrier, has vanished. The same principles Tesla hoped would end war have instead made it more abstract, more detached, easier to initiate. Technology did not make humanity wiser. It made humanity louder. And still, Tesla's moral vision remains unfinished. He believed scientific progress must be paired with ethical evolution, that intelligence without compassion was merely efficiency applied to destruction. The world adopted his inventions, but not his restraint. Perhaps that was inevitable. Tesla was not a man of institutions. He distrusted bureaucracy, despised profit-driven innovation, and rejected ownership of ideas. Modern society is built on the opposite assumptions. In such a system, Tesla was always destined to lose. Not because he was wrong, but because he refused to play by its rules. That may be his greatest tragedy. He did not lack recognition because he failed. He lacked it because he would not compromise the future for the present. Today, Tesla's legacy exists in fragments. In the alternating current powering cities, in radio waves saturating the air, in remote control, robotics, renewable energy, and visions of global connectivity. His influence is everywhere, and his absence is just as pervasive. We remember him as a genius, but genius is too small a word. Tesla was a mirror held up to humanity's potential and to its limitations. He showed what was possible when imagination was disciplined by science. He also revealed what happens when society is unable or unwilling to follow its most visionary minds. In recent years, Tesla's name has returned to prominence. Books, documentaries, and companies borrow his identity, sometimes honoring it, sometimes exploiting it. His image has become symbolic of innovation, rebellion, misunderstood brilliance. But symbolism is not justice. Justice would mean asking the uncomfortable questions his life demands. Why do we celebrate visionaries only after they are no longer a threat? Why do we adopt ideas while erasing the people who refuse to monetize them? And what futures are we ignoring right now because they do not fit existing power structures? Tesla's story is not just about electricity. It is about timing, about power, about the cost of seeing too far ahead. He died believing humanity was capable of greatness, but unwilling to choose it. That belief did not make him bitter. It made him patient. He trusted that someday, when the world finally caught up, his ideas would speak for themselves. They have. Every time a device charges without a wire, every time information travels invisibly across the planet, every time energy is harvested cleanly from nature, every time a machine acts autonomously, Nikola Tesla is there. Not as a footnote, but as a foundation. And perhaps the most haunting truth of all is this: Tesla did not invent tomorrow to be famous. He invented it because he believed humanity could be better than it was. The tragedy is not that he died alone in a hotel room. The tragedy is that we are still learning how to deserve the future he gave us. So the next time you flip a switch, connect to a signal, or watch a machine perform what once seemed impossible, remember the man who saw it all before it existed. A man born in a storm. A mind that could see machines. A future that arrived too late for its creator. Nikola Tesla, the man who invented tomorrow,